Today, we're going to be talking about 5 simple strategies you can use to be more faithful in how you steward your time. You see, a common thing that comes up when we're talking about productivity writ large is it can be a little overwhelming. We can talk about goals, we can talk about time management, we can talk about habits, and there's all these different subsets of things under each of those, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. And so I wanted to address really just 5 strategies, 5 keys you can plug and play this week to start getting the most bang for your buck in terms of productivity. The first key is to start with why. Start with why. So whether it's your goal to mow the lawn today or build $1 million business or just finish a project at work, the driving motivation behind those goals should always be to make God look good. For example, we have 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all for the glory of God. That's why so often in these videos and in my other material, I'm constantly talking about this subject of glorifying God. That's the purpose of your productivity. It's not for you, it's for Him. And so if you start with this big picture, it brings a lot more clarity to the little strategies and all the different things you do. And we'll see how this all fits together in a moment. We talk sometimes in productivity in these different levels. So sometimes people look at just these bottom 3 levels of what I call the productivity pyramid. You have goals, and so you say, okay, I'm going to set a big goal, and then I'm going to break that down into a project, and then that project I'll break down into the daily tasks and habits I do. And that's pretty good. You know, most people will tell you if you start with a goal, then create a plan, and then manage your plan day to day, you'll make a little bit of progress. Eventually, Lord willing, you'll hit that goal. The problem as I see it is this is a secular view of productivity. It doesn't go broad enough. It doesn't connect our goals with our bigger whys. So for example, you might say that a goal is your why. You say, why am I doing this exercise habit every day? Well, it's because I have this goal of getting into a certain shape. And people might say, why are you spending so much time writing every single day? It's because I have this goal about making this book. They supply a reason, they supply a why, but what I submit to you is very often, even as Christians, our whys don't go big enough. What I propose instead in my productivity pyramid is that we start with the biggest why of God's glory. You exist to glorify God. That's why you're here. It says in the Westminster Shorter Catechism that the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. This is literally why everything exists for the glory of God, right? When we talk about the fact that we're made in the image of God, that's our function, right? I am to image forth God. We talk oftentimes about how that gives me value. It certainly does, but it also gives me purpose, right? I'm made in the image of God, which means I want to accurately image Him, accurately showcase Him to the world. That's a really big why to start with. And then another level, if you're watching the video version of this, right underneath God's glory is our domains of stewardship. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for a very long period of time, you know I really harp on this idea of domains of stewardship, this concept of breaking your life down into its major areas. Several episodes back, we talked about 7 domains. These are the 6 I've traditionally used. We talk about your spiritual, relational, vocational, physical, financial, and recreational. I added one more recently that I would call your intellectual domain, so life of the mind. But you don't have to follow my patterns. This is sort of just a suggested way of breaking your life into different categories so you can see which ones you're being faithful in and which ones maybe you need a little bit of work. How would you use this? Well, if I know that my objective in life is to glorify God, then I also know that I want to glorify Him by being faithful in each of the domains of stewardship He's given me. I don't just want to be faithful in the abstract. I want to be faithful with my relationships. I want to be faithful with my finances. I want to be faithful with my body. I want to be faithful with my recreation, right? All of those areas I want to be faithful in. So now here's the real trick. I can look at these areas of my life, these domains of stewardship, and say, hey, where do I need to focus some attention? This is something we talked a while back ago when we talked about quarterly goals. So one of the things you can do is each quarter, every several months, you look at all the major areas of your life and you say, how am I doing here? And you just grade yourself 1 through 5. I'm a 5 out of 5 in terms of I'm keeping my spiritual disciplines. My walk with the Lord is good. The spiritual domains, that's in good shape. But my health domain, my physical body, I'm not eating right. I know I'm not exercising as much as I should. Maybe that's a 2. So what you do is you look at that definition of what you think faithfulness should look like in a specific domain of life, and then where you are currently, and you say, I want to address that gap in faithfulness. How will I do that? I'm going to set a goal. That is simply you saying, here is an outcome that I want to achieve. I am here right now. I want to be here, right? And so a goal just defines that really, really clearly. With writing a book, for example, I wanted to increase in my vocation, right? That was an area I wanted to be more faithful in. I wanted to be faithful to teach the Bible and teach about productivity like believed God had called me to. And I said, hey, a way I can be more faithful in that is to write a book. I want to do that. That's going to be the goal that's going to help me be more faithful in this area of teaching the Lord's given me to oversee. Then I took that goal and I broke it down into projects. I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I have to submit proposals, right? I need to make a project of actually, once I got the book contract, I got to make a project of actually writing the book, right? Write the outline, write the chapter, edit the chapter, right? And you go through all that. And then that all had to happen in time. That had to happen in my day-to-day. And so I had some tasks. I said, okay, email this person this day, email this person this day. And then when I was actually in the writing process, it turned more into a habit. Write for this long each day, write a little bit this day, right? And I got into these rhythms because the objective was, how do I make my tasks and habits that I'm doing today connect to my projects that I've set up, to the goals that are bringing me closer to the faithfulness in each domain of stewardship, which ultimately will help me to better glorify God with my life. That's the big picture. Because what we really want, guys, is this through line to go through all that we do, all of our tasks and habits, projects, goals, domains. All of it is about glorifying God. If the aim of stewarding our time is faithfulness, then this is exactly how we would do it, or this would be a strategy for doing it. And so that's why we start with why, because as Thomas Watson said, the glory of God is a silver thread which must run through all our actions. It's not about time management, it's about time stewardship, because it's God's time. And this fundamental shift in the way we think about it can trickle down to every area of our life. What I mean to say is it can trickle down to every level at which we live life, at the level of goals, at the level of domains, at the level of projects, whether the daily tasks and habits. That's the big picture that I think serves us as Christians, and which honestly you don't get in more secular approaches to productivity. They want to connect the day-to-day of how you live to some larger purpose, but they don't have a consistent worldview to do that. We do, and we know that ultimately we're here to glorify God, and so our productivity just becomes a vehicle to help us do that. And that why supplies motivation, it supplies meaning at all levels. Even when you're grinding out stuff that you need to do each day, you can connect it back to, no, I get to glorify God in this. I see how it all connects. The second key I would give you is to set clear goals. Again, this goes back to our productivity pyramid, but the idea is that time management is not about squeezing everything in. It's actually more about making time for what matters most. And you say, okay, how do you do that? Everything seems to matter most. Everything's urgent. No, but not everything is important. And what a goal allows you to do is define in hyper clear language, this is what's important right now. This is the priority. That is the function of a goal. It defines for you an outcome that you're trying to achieve in very clear language such that you know that's the priority. This supplies you with what you need to actually focus. If you look at the pyramid again, this is kind of overlaps the domains level and the goals level of the pyramid if you're watching on the video version. The idea is you build on these together. You choose a domain of stewardship and then you set a goal in that domain. And here's how goals really help you. They do a few things. First, goals help you by giving you direction. They point you at something. I don't know where I'm heading without a goal. I don't know. I'm just going to be doing a bunch of effort without a goal, right? It's the same thing. We often use sailing analogies. If you don't have a direction you're pointing your boat in, you can row as much as you want, but you're not getting anywhere. And so often in our day-to-day, we might exert a lot of effort, and we might be real tired, we might be exhausted, but we don't actually get anywhere because we haven't charted a course, we haven't set a goal for ourselves. Goals also indicate priority. Like I mentioned, you can take a goal and it tells you this is the main thing. That's really powerful. And in fact, I think one of the great functions of a goal is what you are managing time for. So think about this with me. A lot of times people say, I struggle with time management. It's not exactly time management if you're just juggling all this. I'm trying to do everything. That's what people think time management means. No, time management means I need to manage my time such that I reach a goal. If you don't have a defined goal, you have no clarifying purpose around which you're organizing your time. Likewise, related is a goal gives you a reason to say no. Many opportunities will come across your plate, many interruptions, many things that might seem good. But if you have a clear goal, you can with confidence say, no, I can't do that right now. This is the priority. Without a goal, everything just keeps knocking on your door and saying, here's the priority, here's the priority, here's the priority. And you just spin your wheels and you don't get any traction. And that is why you're stuck all the time. You don't have a goal. If you struggle to manage your time, I'm betting that 9 times out of 10, it's because you don't have clarity about your goals and priorities. Just practically, the best way to clarify a goal is to write it down. This is from James Clear's blog. He's the guy who wrote Atomic Habits, but he was talking about a study in the British Journal of Health and Psychology, which found that 91% of people who planned their intention to exercise by writing down when and where they would exercise each week ended up following through. If you're watching, there's a graph on the screen, and on the left side, there's group 1 that says 38% of them reached their goal of exercising at least one time a week. And that was the control group. They didn't have these people do anything different. And 38% of them fulfilled the goal that they had set. The second group, only 35% of them fulfilled the goal. So it was actually a little bit lower than the control. And the only thing those people did different is they gave them motivational stuff to read, stuff about workouts, they gave magazines, fitness magazines, that kind of thing. And they said, is motivation going to help them? Being inspired by other people, will that help? It didn't, actually. But in the third group, 91% of them met their goal. What was the difference between them and the control group and the one that just the motivation stuff? One thing. They wrote down when and where they would exercise each week. That's it. They wrote the goal down, and that helped them reach it. And so we know this intuitively, but it's interesting, I think, to see studies that, hey, the same results bear out. Write your goal down. So if there's nothing else you take away from this episode, I would hope that maybe you would sit down and say, okay, what is my goal? I want to pray more. All right, let's define that. When and where are you going to pray each day? What's that going to look like? Are you going to keep a prayer journal? How is that going to work? Oh, I want to read the Bible more. Okay, when and where are you going to read the Bible more? What is the actual plan? Are you going to read through one chapter a day? Are you going to follow a plan? Define that stuff, write it down, and you're much more likely to do it. In fact, I'll have a link in the description in the show notes here, a goal setting worksheet you can use that will actually help you to do this. It gives you a spot for the goal name, the target date to complete it, what domain of stewardship it belongs in, a bunch of stuff to help you clarify it as much as possible, because the trick is the clearer the goal, the more likely you are to hit it, right? If you make a very vague goal, like people always do this, I want to lose weight. That is not a clear goal. That's just a wish you've thrown out into the ether. You've got to really nail it down. And this, if you follow all the prompts in this worksheet that you can download, it will force you to think about this clearly. And more importantly, it'll force you to answer the question, how does this goal glorify God? And usually the answer to that is something in terms of it allows me to steward this area of life more faithfully so that I can serve others. The third key is make specific plans. It says in Proverbs 16:3, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. The idea here is that we want to take our goals and not just write them down, but we want to turn them into an action plan. I don't want to just write this thing down, put it on a sticky note on my monitor, and then 12 months from now, when the stickiness wears off and it falls off, I say, I'll just throw that in the trash. Another goal I never actually did. Now you got to take a next step with this. We see planning all over the scriptures presented as the same as wisdom. I talked about this not long ago, so I won't belabor the point. But in Proverbs, planning and wisdom are treated as like a hand in glove thing. People who are wise are those who plan ahead. People who are foolish are those who don't plan ahead. The difference between the sluggard and the wise man in Proverbs is the difference between a person who looked to the future and prepared for it by planting, by harvesting the right times, and a person who ignored the future, didn't think about it, and just sat on their bum. You say, oh, I really, really want to reach these goals. I really, really want to glorify God more in my life, but you make no changes because you don't set a goal, because you don't make a plan. Sit down today. Make a plan. I will just tell you from personal experience, again and again and again and again and again, the difference maker in my life is I'll have these huge things I've wanted to try to do for so long, and I just don't do it. What changes? It's the moment I sit down and say, I'm going to take an hour and I'm going to make a plan for how to do this. And guess what? More than likely, I actually follow through on that plan because I took the time to articulate it clearly. And it's funny because I wish I could go back in time and say, shake old Reagan or young Reagan and say, hey, just make a plan. Just sit down for 1 hour. You're beating your head against the wall saying, oh, if only, if only. Just sit down and make a plan. And then all you have to do is follow the plan. If you're watching, this fits into our pyramid of productivity under the projects area. Projects is the plans you make to reach a goal. That's all it is. And again, if you use that goal setting sheet that I have linked in the description, if you want to download and print it off or just use it on your computer, it's got prompts for all of this. And it's even got stuff about like overcoming different obstacles you might face. Like, what resources do I need to reach this goal? Do I have those? How will I get them? How am I going to quantify my progress? What projects, what habits do I need to put into place? Honestly, I tried to make this as simple as possible for myself because I wanted to, whenever I was faced with a goal I wanted to reach, I just wanted a repeatable system. And this is almost dummy proof, wherein you can just start filling out each part of the sheet, and by the end of it, you will have a very clear plan of attack. Here's a few benefits of projects. Projects create urgency with deadlines. So a good project has a deadline. I want to finish this by this date. We often talk about living under the tyranny of the urgent. The reason we don't get a lot of important things done is because urgent things, we're always putting out fires. When you put a deadline on a project that's actually important, you turn the important thing into an urgent thing. Projects give you specific steps. I don't have to, every time I sit down to go to work, have to figure out, oh, what should I try to do? I've already laid it out for myself. I think a lot of us, our brains live in two modes. There's sort of planning mode and like action mode, and it's hard to go back and forth. So when you sit down for a long planning session, what you're doing is you're making it so future you, who just is in action mode, can just sit down and follow the plan. They also provide a sense of progress. As you knock out projects in reaching you towards your goal, you can feel like, oh, I'm getting closer, I'm getting closer, I'm getting closer. And little by little, yes, they advance you toward the goal. The fourth key to faithful time stewardship is schedule your week. This is taking your time and actually managing it, or stewarding it, as I like to say, around your bigger plans. A lot of times people want to fast forward to this. They want to say, oh, how do I manage my time at the day-to-day so everything gets done? But you have to do all of this work that we've just done to actually know how to manage your time. You have to have your big why. You have to have a clear goal. You have to have laid out projects for yourself. Then the hard work is just, how do I make sure I make progress on this every day? But that actually becomes a lot easier once you have the clarity that some of that pre-work gets you of setting clear goals and making projects. So this big colorful spreadsheet that you'll see if you're watching the video version of this is my weekly schedule. It looks really complicated, but it really isn't. It just is a simple plan of an ideal week that I would like to pursue. And when I have this set up, it gives me some definition of a normal week and something to aim for. If I even get close to this, I know that I'm doing pretty well at servicing the different areas of my life. And again, most importantly, hitting on that big, most important goal that I'm working on at the moment. So the way it works is you sort of set areas for each of your domains of stewardship. That's why it's color coded. And again, you can also get this, I'll send a link to this in the show notes where you could download a version of this on Google Sheets. It allows you to color code the different areas of your life so that you can see more clearly what the breakdowns are, how you're giving time to each of the areas of your life. But even if you don't use my fancy Google Sheet, it's just the idea of following a set schedule. Mondays I do this, Tuesdays I do this, Thursdays I do this, Fridays I do this. It doesn't have to be super complicated. And this can work whether you work in an office or whether you just work at home. If you're a homemaker, you might say, Tuesdays I do meal prep. Wednesdays I clean the bathroom, right? Things like that you can break down at a very high level, and it gives you a little bit of structure to the week and helps you to make sure that the right things get prioritized. So here's how you go about creating a weekly schedule. This is sort of a crash course. You would want to plan your theme days. So that's sort of what I just mentioned there, is where you would just say, which days of the week are dedicated to what? So for me, Wednesdays are dedicated to recording videos, right? Mondays and Fridays tend to be dedicated to administrative type stuff, catching up on emails, doing back office type work, that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be super in depth either. And these are just called theming your days. And you can do that in the sheet. If you want to use the Google Sheet, there's a spot for there as well. You don't just need to theme your days. You also need to go a step further and map your energy levels. There's this great book that came out a few years ago by Carey Nieuwhof called At Your Best. And he gives this process for mapping your energy levels. He talks about you have a green zone, you have a yellow zone, you have a red zone. These are the different types of energy you have each day. Why not create a schedule which respects those? So for example, on my Google Sheet, my weekly schedule, I have mapped that, hey, in the mornings, I'm pretty good. So I map that as green on the times. And so if I have an important thing I'm trying to pursue, for example, if I'm writing a book or if there's a discipline I'm trying to get better at, I'm going to plan it during that green zone when I'm at my sharpest. That's usually when I do a lot of my writing. Likewise, I have a red zone. I have times of the day when, man, I'm just gassed. I can't think straight. I just end up wasting a lot of time because if I keep banging my head against the wall against something that's hard, like if I try to write in the afternoon, usually nothing good's coming out. So instead, I map low energy tasks to low energy times a day. So that's a lot of times when I answer kind of tedious emails or I put my receipts into my system, that kind of stuff. And the middle area, when you're at your yellow energy, the idea there is you're not quite at your best, but you're not at your worst. Maybe that's when you do meetings, maybe that's when you do stuff that requires you to be a little bit on, but you don't have to be 100% the most focused version of you. That's the idea of mapping your energy levels. So first, you plan your theme days, then you map your energy levels. Third, you want to fill in your schedule from most important to least important. So if you're doing this on some sort of spreadsheet like the one that I'll provide to you if you want it, put in the big blocks right away. Put in sleep, right? Put in your meals and then work around those. Say, what's the most important thing I need to be doing? I like to slot in just a big chunk of deep work right in my green zone. So if I have a big project I'm working on, it's going to go in there. And then just move everything else around it. When am I going to do exercise? When am I going to spend time with the family? What am I going to do on Saturdays to keep up with the house? That kind of stuff. And you just go little by little and then you fill in the whole schedule. And then last, you categorize all these different actions, all these different tasks you've put into your weekly schedule. You categorize them by domains of stewardship. Again, if you use the Google Sheet that I'll link to for you, you can color code it and it will actually do a calculation for you at the end and create a little pie chart that shows you how your different energy levels, how much attention they're giving percentage-wise. So obviously the goal isn't to make sure that you're giving attention to every area of life equally. In terms of time, like sleep is always going to be a big one, work's going to be a big one, that's natural, but it will point out discrepancies where you say, oh, I really value relationships, but you look at your schedule that you set up for yourself and you've made no time for that. If you want to go really in depth on this idea of planning your week, we actually have a full course dedicated to this. It's called Optimize Your Week, and it goes super, super in depth on creating an ideal weekly schedule, how to stick to it. There's examples of a pastor's schedule, homemaker schedule, someone who is a Christian professional, there's student version, there's all these different ones, and any question you have about it will be answered. And basically, by the end of the course, you have a complete schedule for your life and you have some order to the chaos. You can get that at redeemingproductivity.com in our store, but it's also included in Academy membership. So if you join the Redeeming Productivity Academy, you get that course along with 6 others and access to our community, our events, all that other stuff. So check that out if you're interested in diving deeper into optimizing your week. And the fifth and final key to faithful time stewardship is to prioritize necessary rest. You've got to be getting rest. You can work, you want to be productive, you want to be efficient, but part of leading a God-glorifying life is actually getting necessary rest because you're not God. Let me give a few principles on this point. First one is beware of burnout. It's real. You overwhelm yourself and you go for too long at full capacity, just always overwhelmed, always busy, go, 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 go. You will burn out, and all those quote unquote productivity gains you made by overworking will all be lost. And it is not a good state of being health-wise, even spiritually. It is not healthy to put yourself at the brink of burnout. Not a good idea. So beware of burnout, but also avoid the myth of perfect efficiency. If you get into this idea of optimizing your life from productivity, which is what we're trying to do, but if you do that from the perspective of, hey, I'm more like a machine that can be optimized to perfection, you're going to go wrong. You have to think in terms of, I'm not a machine, I'm more like a plant. I'm more like a fruit tree that produces fruit than a factory that produces, robots or something. The difference is that a robot or an automaton or a machine can go 24 hours a day. Not an organic being like you. You need rest. You need to take a break once in a while. You will never be perfectly efficient. I think even this idea when we talked about managing your energy levels, that gets to it as well, is, hey, you don't have equal energy at all times of the day. You're not at the same level of output, at 1 a.m. as you are at 1 p.m. And so admitting that allows you to maybe chill out a little bit in terms of what you think is actually possible or preferable in optimizing your life. Another principle for rest is, remember, faithfulness means stewarding all of your domains. Don't over-index and say, oh, faithfulness just means stewarding this one area I'm focused on right now. I just want to be really, really productive at work. Well, what if you neglect all the other areas of life? Right? You don't want that. The goal, remember the big why, is to glorify God. And we glorify him by being faithful with all that he's given us to steward, not just one area we hyperfixate on. The last point I'll make on rest is this: get comfortable with your creatureliness. You are not God. You are not omnipotent. You are not omniscient. It says in the Psalms that as a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. For he knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust. I love that last part. He knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust. Follow the logic here. God shows compassion to us like a father shows compassion to his children because, it says, for he, that's God, knows our frame. That means he knows what we're made of, namely dust. The reason we show compassion to our children, yes, it's because we love them, but it's also because we know that, hey, that they're not adults. I don't treat them the way I treat an adult. I don't have the same expectations for them. They're weak. They're tiny. They're emotionally immature. They're kind of dumb. They don't know everything there is to know. And so I have a sympathy for them. And what the psalmist is saying is God feels that way towards us. He doesn't expect us to be perfectly efficient, perfectly productive, do everything all the time, because he knows we're not God. He's the one who made us. He remembers, hey, you're dust. And we need to remember that too, don't we, sometimes? We need to remember that I can't go all the time. God doesn't expect that of me. I can't put these expectations on myself that are higher than what God wants in terms of my productivity, my output. I got to live like I'm a human being because I am. I'm only human. And God knows that. But a lot of times I need to be reminded of it. And so I need to rest. I need to enjoy the good things he's given me. And that is part of my stewardship, part of glorifying God, right? Having that holistic idea of productivity from a Christian worldview is one of the ways I glorify God is not by always go, but actually stepping back and enjoying the good benefits of what he's given me, the produce of my own work. I get to actually enjoy that and rest in it. 5 keys to faithful time stewardship is start with why, that's the glory of God, set clear goals, make specific plans, schedule your week, and prioritize necessary rest. If you do those 5 things, I think you're going to be in a really good spot productivity-wise. So pick one this week, start working on it, and see what the Lord does. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this has been helpful to you. I would love to hear too if you like the new format. If you're watching the video version of this, I kind of have slides that I put up as I go, and hopefully makes it a little more visually interesting. Let me know what you think. Any suggestions for future topics, you can drop them in the comments, or you can always email me at reagan@redeemingproductivity.com. That's REAGAN at redeemingproductivity.com. And I will see you here next week, Lord willing.